There are very few sim racing products you could truly call iconic. The Playseat Evolution is one of them. First released back in 2008, it became the cockpit that introduced thousands of people to sim racing. Even today, nearly 2 decades later, it's still widely available and continues to attract new buyers. But has it stood the test of time, or has the market simply moved on? Let's find out. Inside the box you'll find an excellent assembly manual, all the necessary tools to assemble the cockpit, mounting bolts for your peripherals, and adhesive felt pads to prevent scratches on your floor. The configuration of the pedals on the Playseat Evolution can be done via 2 parts. The first part is the inclination of the pedal plate itself. It can incline from completely flat up until a very high degree of inclination. For most pedals this is perfectly good. For these Moza SRP pedals, for example, you have them already in a bit of an angle backwards. So this is with most pedals, cheaper pedals, this is the case. With a bit more expensive pedals, you can see that those pedals are mounted like in a 90-degree curve on the pedal plate itself, and this will be a bit more difficult to mount them because the pedal plate doesn't have inclination towards the front and down. So this can be a bit of an issue. But like I said, for most pedals, the inclination is okay. The second part of the configuration is the distance from the pedals towards the seat itself. And this can be done very easy on the fly, just by turning this knob here. And then you can just slide it closer or further away. I think for leg length, you have quite a lot of range to configure the pedals. So I said this is on the fly. The inclination itself, the angle of inclination for the pedals is not on the fly. One very important aspect here is that while the configuration is very easy, there are no pre-drilled, pre-threaded holes to screw the balls into. This means that the configuration is held in place purely by the clamping force of the hand screw. Configuration of the wheelbase holder is also two-folded. You can bring the wheelbase holder down with the hand screw, very easily to do on the fly, and you can bring the entire wheelbase holder also closer and further away. Now the remark that I have with this is, you can see that the wheelbase itself, it comes very low. There is no angle adjustment possible for the wheelbase holder plate, and this makes it come very low. Another point which is very annoying is that it is also dependent on the pedals, how far the pedals are, how far that you can slide back the wheelbase holder. For now, for example, my pedals, they are too far away. If I slide them closer to where they are comfortable to operate, then you can see that the wheelbase, the steering wheel and the wheelbase holder, it comes very close to my body, which makes me sit a bit in an awkward position. So I don't think that the configuration is really suited for wheelbases like this, which are relatively low and straight, but it is better suited for Logitech bases, for example, that are a bit tilted upwards, so that the steering wheel just comes a bit higher. When it comes to the configuration of the seat wall, it is very easy. There is not really configuration to be done. You can slide it, of course, further away from the pedals or closer by the same mechanism that I showed you before, but that is really it. The backrest cannot be inclined, and that is a bit of a shame, especially because the steering wheel already comes this low. It would have been handy if the seat could be inclined a bit backwards to have a bit of a better position to drive in, but unfortunately not possible. Now, I won't comment on the minimum and maximum height for the seat though. It has been a major discussion point between the manufacturer and myself, and I don't want to start another polemic discussion again, so I will just say that for me, an average male of 173 centimeters, it didn't really suit me with the available configuration. The testing setup for the pedals consists of a set of SRP light pedals from Moza. From the footage, it can be clearly seen that there is a lot of vertical movement going on when using these pedals. This originates from the fact that there is no support towards the back end of the pedal plate. The problem is not really that you see the movement, the problem is that you also notice it when you drive it. If you start out driving, this is not an issue for most drivers, but once you get a bit serious and want to set some lap times, this will become a point of frustration. And this is only with standard pedals. If you would add a pedal set with load cells on this tray, you simply won't be able to get the consistency that load cell pedals are designed to provide with this amount of flex. The wheelbase holder is also not that great when it comes to stability. This is mainly because of the design. The one supporting beam in combination with a very flimsy configuration method makes it very susceptible for movement. While side-to-side movement is still reasonable, the front-to-back movement is horrible. The Moza R5 is not a real powerhouse direct drive, but it is already clear that it's too powerful for this wheelbase holder. I do need to place it in context though. When the Playseat Evolution was designed and released, direct drive wheelbases were still very much a niche product in the sim racing world. And the Logitech G25 and G27 were about the most powerful wheelbases most drivers could afford. Without any real updates to the frame to go with the evolution of the wheelbases, unfortunately the Playseat Evolution probably has the least rigid wheelbase holder out there. That being said, our community is very resourceful and I have seen some pimped out Playseat Evolutions that could handle a direct drive. But for most of the drivers, steer clear of the Evolution in combination with the direct drive. At first when you sit in it, it is okay. I also think that when you are driving 2 hours, that the seating has enough support for your bum, so it won't hurt there. But again, I really miss some configuration of this seat. I feel that my back doesn't get enough support in this seat, and I really would have loved that I could tilt it a bit backwards when I drive. So like I say, at first it's comfortable, but I think older people would like a bit of a more bigger chair that is more configurable than this one. Another thing to take into account, the seat squeaks. When you're driving a bit, then you will hear a lot of squeaking, and this can be annoying for certain people. I would also say that the back, because it can be folded down, it is not that sturdy as it can be. So those are also two things to think about when buying the Playseat Evolution. A thorn in the eye of many people that drive with the Playseat Evolution in our community is the pole in the middle. When you drive with the 2-pedal setup, like these SRP lights of Moza, it's still really comfortable to operate both the brake and the accelerator. But from the moment that you have a 3-pedal base setup, then it becomes really hard, because the brake pedal will be centered right behind this pole. And if you have the pole already very close to these pedals, it will become very almost impossible to operate the brake pedal in a comfortable way. You will always have your foot a bit tilted on the braking pedal. It's just not comfortable. I really would not recommend driving the Playseat Evolution with a 3-pedal base set. Footprint is without doubt a strong point of the Playseat Evolution. When it is folded out, it comes in at 130 centimeters in length, 48 centimeters in width, this is very narrow, and 98 centimeters in height, the top of the chair. If it is folded in, it becomes 108 centimeters in height, 60 centimeters in depth, and again 48 centimeters in width. So this is a very, very space efficient solution, the Playseat Evolution. With a weight of 21 kilograms, it is also one of the lighter sim racing cockpits on the market, making it relatively easy to move around or store when not in use. When it comes to the ecosystem, well, the list is very short. There is a specific shifter holder available and a generic mat, and that is all. The price is always a bit dependent on the region and where you buy it from. If you buy this from the Playseat store, official one, you pay €279 for this model. If you buy it via a retailer, it can be €20 less, €250 about. And it also depends on which type that you want, because this one is a racing suede, it's called version, but there is also the Actifit version, which I like a lot more. You sweat a lot less in that one than this one. And then you also have the Pro version, which has like the same seat but with some extra bolstering for around your head. The rest it's all the same, but it's called Pro. Well, yeah, for marketing, I assume. It all depends a bit. I do think that it is quite a heavy price tag for what you get. But if you look at the second-hand market, there are a lot of Playseat Evolutions out there that can be really bought for €150 or perhaps even less. Reviewing the Playseat Evolution in 2026 is quite an interesting experience. 15 years ago, it was one of the defining products in sim racing. Today, however, the market has evolved dramatically, while the Evolution itself has remained largely unchanged. It struggles in areas that have become increasingly important: rigidity, adjustability, and compatibility with modern direct drive hardware. Its biggest strength remains its compact footprint, although even there, products like the Playseat Challenge now offer strong competition. So who would I recommend it to? At its current retail price, honestly, very few people. On a second-hand market, however, the story changes completely. Because so many Playseat Evolutions have been sold over the years, you can often find one for around €120, and at that price it becomes a perfectly reasonable entry point into sim racing, especially for parents looking for a first cockpit for their children. Despite its flaws, it still delivers something special, the feeling of sitting in a dedicated racing cockpit, and for many people, that's exactly where the hobby begins. Because of its historical significance and despite the compromises it requires today, the Playseat Evolution earns a C tier in my ranking.